Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Country History X podcast. My name is Trigger from SavingCountryMusic.com, and I am the host, writer, and narrator of the podcast, whose goal is to engage folks with the history of country music from the very beginnings of the genre to even more present-day stories by focusing on some of the wildest, weirdest, saddest, and most interesting subject matter and stories to ever grace the music. Since one of my pet peeves with podcasts is having to sit through long introductions or self-indulgent biographies on the host when you just want to get to the content, my plan is to keep any chit-chat beyond the specific subject of a given episode to a minimum, and instead get right into the meat and potatoes of the story. But since some may be curious about the approach and how the podcast will unfold, or the spirit behind it, I thought I would compose this introduction for folks who want to hear a little bit more about what the plan is. Instead of focusing on long-form content, or interviews, or opinion commentary, Country History X will dive super deep into very specific stories, serving somewhat quick but calorie-rich episodes about country music's most enthralling moments and subjects. Yes, there will be a lot of crime, death, drugs, and even murder. You could even consider Country History X like a crime podcast with a country music flavor, or vice versa. But that won't be the sole focus. Sometimes it will simply be telling an interesting story behind a song. As time goes on, all of the episodes will slowly feed into a grander narrative, where if you continue to listen, you will start to get a clearer picture of country music history itself and get to know some of the biggest artists, players, sidemen, and songwriters. You will start to understand what makes country music tick and how the genre itself unfolds like a story. Eventually, each little vignette will begin to reveal a bigger tapestry, with small bits of information conveyed in passing becoming part of a bigger and richer narrative. Though a particular episode may seem like a tangent or only tangentially associated with country music, hopefully over time, by listening to this podcast, you will go from a country music novice to an expert on the subject, or even if you're an expert already, you will learn something new. It's crazy how so many of the stories and subject matters in country music feed into deeper, recurring themes. Though most of the episodes are likely to be around 20 to 25 minutes, or the length of an average commute, or a sitcom without the commercials, or about the average length of a chapter of a book, there will be some longer episodes here and there as well, or some shorter supplemental episodes if necessary. If 20 or so minutes isn't long enough for you, that's okay, because the idea is for there to be many of these episodes eventually, covering country music in its many forms and over multiple eras. Eventually, I'm sure many of country music's most famous stories will receive the Country History X treatment, but the focus will be on stories that aren't found in history books, haven't been covered in podcasts or in major news stories, that are breaking or being revealed in the here and now, as well as revising history when necessary if the record got something wrong. Though the episodes may have a lot of twists and turns that may seem sensational, everything here has been painstakingly fact-checked. Though the podcast will not have any interviews per se, though perhaps audio snippets of interviews may be used here or there, if subjects or their heirs are still alive, information is fact-checked and vetted directly from sources to make sure it is accurate as possible, and sources will be cited in corresponding articles that can be found on SavingCountryMusic.com for each episode. This isn't just a regurgitation of stories found in biographies, but a more detailed telling and assessment of these important country music moments. So even though the stories might seem crazy and sensational, they're 100% true, at least from what we know. That's what's so cool about country music. You just can't make this stuff up. Due to the current rules on music rights, you won't hear any actual music on the Country History X podcast either, not even snippets. But the podcast has been built with that very limitation in mind and will hopefully work as a recommendation portal for some of the music, songs, and artists highlighted in episodes for you to discover on your own, and any actual music won't be missed from the podcast. And of course, if you have a tip, an idea, a correction, or anything else, navigate over to SavingCountryMusic.com and drop a message. And while you're over there, check out the website for news, reviews of new music, and in-depth commentary on country music from the present and past, and feel free to follow us on social media. And finally, there is no Patreon for Saving Country Music or the Country History X podcast at the moment, no subscriptions needed, no t-shirts or koozies for sale. Take your musical dollars and spend them on today's artists who are doing what they can to keep the music alive. All I ask from you is your attention. And if you like what you hear or see, tell someone else. Thanks for listening, and let's go save country music.